By the way, I was listening to the Countdown to Kickoff show yesterday with Tony Bruno and company, and I heard a John McMullen update that said there was no Omelette Bar yesterday at the Eagle game, much to the dismay of one J.F. McMullen. Was that so?
No, that's a Tony Bruno question. They haven't had the Omelette Bar for a long time, but he's got this assumption that they have it. They cut out the Omelette Bar and the carving station. What?
Yep, they went
what would you say, Jeff? Certainly,
they have good stuff.
Certainly last year they didn't have it. Everything kind of, and Jeff could probably speak to this as well. It's at least 2 years, but it could be longer.
I think we're on Joe Santaliquido punishment. That article came out bashing Carson, and now we all have to suffer.
Now we don't have the omelet.
So is that when the omelet station went out?
No, I'm just messing. It actually went out last year for whatever reason.
Is the omelet station typically there for the 1 o'clocks?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
What do they, for the 1 o'clock game?
Games.
For the 1 o'clock game, is it a breakfast spread or is it a lunch spread or is it both?
Both.
Thank goodness.
You have breakfast and you have cold cuts for people that want to go that route. You got salads. They always have a complimentary sort of meat to go with the scrambled eggs. Jerk chicken a couple weeks ago, which was actually a big hit.
Roast pork yesterday.
All right.
Yeah, roast pork yesterday.
Yep.
But, the omelet bar was a big favorite, and that is it's gone, and I don't think it's coming back, let's be honest.
All right. Well, I did catch some of
Good
that.
segue to Desean Jackson, John. So.
Is he coming back?
Yes, give us an update on Desean Jackson while you're at it.
Well, he's gonna do more this week. I think they're hopeful he can be back for Minnesota this weekend. And the goal, worst case, is Dallas, which I think kind of shifted a couple weeks ago. They wanted to make sure he was ready for that Dallas game. So I think they're hopeful he can play this week, but the certainty is that he will be back for Dallas. And we'll see how this week goes. But it's getting closer and closer, and I think you see this offense is not the same without his presence, and that really shouldn't be any surprise because he creates some difficulties for opposing defenses that just can't be duplicated by other players on this team. And we've talked about that a lot going back to even when you had Torrey Smith or somebody of that nature. He's not nearly the player Desean Jackson is, but at least he had a speed presence. And they really haven't had a productive field stretcher since Desean left the first time. It's been a long time, and they struggle with that aspect when he's not on the field.
Is anybody actually clear as to what his actual injury is?
Well, it's an abdomen. Doug called it a strain today, which I think before there was a report from ESPN and our buddy Tim McManus that it's a slight tear. And that's where, if it's a tear, I contacted an independent surgeon from New York who works with a lot of athletes. That's a sports hernia. So that's what it is. Now, people have played through that before, but it tells you the other people have had major issues. Mac Hollins being a perfect example of they repaired one side. Typically, when you have that surgery, you repair both sides. They tried to get through it with one, and it created a bigger issue. So I don't think they want that term out there, sports hernia, but I think that's what he has. And he's a 32-year-old guy, and he's made his decision, and he's trying to fight through it. What we do know is at least one doctor recommended surgery. So that indicates sports hernia.
Yeah, so Doug, I think semantics becomes very important here, and they only add to the confusion a little bit, John, right? Because Doug was asked if Desean needs surgery, and he said, no, nothing like that. And so I think the common fan reads that as, oh, well, then this strain can heal by itself. I always interpreted it was that he's going to have to deal with this. It's not going to heal by itself. It's just that he can fight through it, and then maybe at the end of the year he'll have a surgery, especially if the strain gets to be a little bit worse. Is that how you read it? That he eventually will go into the knife? Yeah.
Exactly. He's trying to fight through it. He's trying to play through it. And that was, I think, the decision of, as I said, 32-year-old player is excited to be back and wants to do everything he can to be back on the field rather than get the surgery, which would have been probably 8 weeks on the conservative side. So I think that's what you're seeing, and that's sort of what you weigh. Should you get the surgery and come back later in the season or try to fight through it and miss a couple weeks? Remember, originally they were hoping he was only going to miss 2 weeks. Right. Well, we're already past that, and it's conceivable it could be another week. It's conceivable he couldn't play in Minnesota as well, and then you're already at 4 weeks. This has been a problem with the Eagles, and I've talked about this before, I know, with you, Jeff. People talk about the medical staff, and they take a lot of hits, especially for soft tissue injuries. I've always believed that the problem is more of messaging, and here's another example of it. Even today, you heard Doug say the terms strain as far as not a tear. I think that was on purpose. And the second part is he put the caveat at the end, kind of jokingly. I'm not a doctor. I don't have a stethoscope. So you always have that plausible deniability. And that's what the Eagles believe in for competitive advantage purposes. I think they overrate that kind of stuff. And my best example of that is Darren Sproles from last year. They kept saying hamstring, 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 just a regular hamstring. He's out 10 weeks. And, fans start to question, why the heck can't he get back on the field? It's a hamstring. Well, lo and behold, Darren finally got back, and he admitted he was dealing with much more than a hamstring. So I don't agree with the messaging and how the Eagles handle these types of things, mainly from the player's perspective, because then you start to get questioned. Why aren't you back on the field? Why aren't you fighting through this? This is just a hamstring. This is just an abdomen strain. And I think if you're above board, it kind of explains things better. And it's not really helping you out from a competitive standpoint. I mean, the teams understand what they're dealing with. So I think it's an organizational misstep, and I continue to think it's an organizational misstep.
The Eagles just picked up Robert Davis, who is a 24-year-old wide receiver, to the practice squad today, John.
Hi.
And, hey, Jeff's next to me. And I don't know if that means anything in regards to Desean Jackson or nothing at all. That's just insurance, or let's pick up this guy, see what he looks like, inside the practice facility, or what can you say to that move?
Well, he can run, so I understand where you're going with that. He's a 4.4 guy, but I mean, he's on the practice squad. He's not here as a replacement for Desean Jackson. Even if, say, Desean were to try to come back and suffer a setback and be out for the season, it's not like this guy's going to be able to replace what he brought to the team. I mean, you kind of saw against the Jets. I mean, Nelson Aguilar can run. He can run. But he can't track the football in the air. So, you have that.
That's all.
Well, he's certainly not consistent. We've talked about Nelson a lot. He makes some big plays, but he'll also drop the easy one. I think you saw yesterday, he got open deep, and people are saying Carson overthrew him or he got held earlier in the route, which is all true. But if he tracks the football early, if that's Desean Jackson, forget about the speed. Desean picks that football up, and he's going to catch it. And I think that was the bigger issue, just can't track the football. So a lot of guys in the NFL, long story to say that a lot of guys in this league can run. They can't be Desean Jackson because he's got more than just the ability to stretch the field. He's also, as I said, tremendous, one of the best ever tracking the football and the deep ball.
Hey, John, yesterday it seemed the message from Doug was, we won, but I wasn't thrilled with that. And he pointed out the flaws of the offense. Did you see it the same way? A lot of people are saying, well, they scored a couple touchdowns on defense. Carson's completion percentage wasn't great. You're talking about Desean Jackson, but what about this offense? Is there something missing from it? Is it just Desean Jackson?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think missing Deshaun is a big part of it. I think it hurts what they can do. I'm not going to get caught up in this game, both sides. I said, to me, and this is what I wrote on 973ESPN.com, this was a take care of business sort of game. And that was a terrible team. All you got to do is use it as a speed bump, get through it, and get on to the next game and the start of a 3-game road trip, which in many ways will tell us the tale of this team, I think. And that's both the good and bad. 10 sacks. I didn't go overboard and say the lack of sacks in the first 4 games were a big deal. I didn't think they were as big a deal as other people did. And this game, I don't think 10 is a turning point against that team and that offensive line and those quarterbacks. I think in a lot of ways, this is like Atlanta on the good side. Just throw it out and get to the next one that matters. It was one of those situations where the Jets were so bad offensively, you could stick Craig James at left corner and not have to worry about him because they can't get anybody the football. Now, offensively, the Jets are competent defensively. And so the Eagles weren't rolling over them because they have some good players. Steve McClendon had a big game, was disrupting stuff up front. So, I mean, it wasn't great, but it's just sort of, it could have been worse. They didn't play down to their competition. They took care of business. And just like Dallas in the first 3 weeks with a bad schedule, that's all you can do. You can only play who's out there. And the Eagles handled their business.
So, John, you know me. I'm not here for any Carson Wentz slander. We know he's not any problem. However, I do note the trend of Doug Peterson in a press conference when asked about Carson will say, played a good game, really did what we asked him to do, wish he would have gotten the ball out a few times. And that's been 3, 4, 5 times this year already. I did watch a little tape, and I thought there were a few checkdowns again that Carson did not want to hit, and frankly, he was a little bit erratic yesterday against a fairly decent defense that probably wasn't given enough credit. But the fact that Doug has said it that many times, I think we talk about this a lot, this whole Brett Favre mentality where no matter how great the coach alongside you is, the quarterback's going to do what he wants to do. Do you feel like that's basically what we're going to get week in, week out with Carson?
Yep, I do. and the reason why is you can go back to his first year. I mean, they've been preaching this to him since the day he got on campus at the NovaCare complex.
Right.
To protect himself. I remember one press conference when Frank Reich was here. I never saw Frank. Anybody who's been around Frank knows he's a pretty even-keeled guy. He was upset because Carson wasn't listening to his advice about getting rid of the football. And it's mainly not about taking what's there or about leaving yards on the field. It's more about protecting himself, and we've seen that borne out over the years with some of the injuries, and that's their bigger concern, is the more you try to extend these plays, the more you leave yourself up for both the spectacular and a catastrophe. And the catastrophe is generally the injury. You can imagine, for instance, everybody's talking about the Houdini play where he ducks under Quinnen Williams. Well, what if Big Quinnen hits him there? And what happens? You think about what changed the NFL a couple of years ago. Aaron Rodgers outside the pocket trying to extend the play, and Anthony Barr catches up with him, and all of a sudden he's out for 2 months. That's the Eagles' concern, and that's the fine line, and I don't know how you fix it. I mean, you don't want to take what makes Carson Wentz great out of his game. So, yeah, it is kind of like Brett Favre. You hope he turns into the durable Brett Favre who's able to play through things, because he's going to try to extend plays, and at times he's going to get hit, and it's going to look ugly, and you just kind of hope he doesn't get hurt.
Hey, John, I want to go to defense real fast because they did score. They had 10 sacks. They were all over the place. But it came from guys like Scandrick, and we were asking, all right, should this guy have, Should he have played more, or was it because the Jets are that bad? What's Sidney Jones' deal? I mean, is the pass rush, the sacking part of the pass rush, was it impressive, or is it because the Jets are that bad? Like, what do you take from the defense's effort yesterday? I lamented at the beginning of the show, there's got to be 10 guys on the street that are better than that poor kid who had to play quarterback yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to typically, and now people are going to get upset because typically I defend. This time I'm going to say I take nothing out of that performance. I really don't. That's how bad it was for the Jets offensively. I mean, you got a quarterback who not only is a third-string guy, didn't get first-team reps because of what Adam Gase did, was holding on to the football forever. They do have a terrible offensive line on top of that. So it was ripe for sacks, and the Eagles did it, so I give them credit for taking advantage. I mean, let's put it this way. They're playing, and even though the struggles with Kirk Cousins, you have Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs coming up, you have Amari Cooper the next week. I don't want to see Craig James out against those guys. I don't think that's going to work. So the hope is Sidney Jones can be ready to go this Sunday, and he was clearly dressed only in an emergency to use him. And the Eagles were able to get through it because the quarterback couldn't get the guys outside the football. Is that because of the Eagles or because of the quarterback? Well, I don't think this is a chicken and an egg situation. It was the quarterback. And Orlando Scandrick deserves a lot of credit, but again, come on. I mean, a veteran quarterback is going to recognize he's coming off the edge. So it's you can get excited, but just like I told you, don't get too down over those first 4 weeks. The Eagles are getting pressure. Don't get too up because you're not going to be facing too many more Luke Falks.
What are your thoughts on Brandon Graham moving to the inside? I'm not saying it's a solution, but is there something there to maybe help the defensive line and their pressure at all moving forward? Or is that just the Jets are that bad on the interior? Let's let BG have some fun.
No, I think Brandon's really good inside. He was a couple years ago during the Super Bowl season when they kicked him inside in the interior quite a bit. And for what they have now, and because there is no Malik Jackson, there is no Tim Jernigan, I think that's their best option to kick Brandon inside. And I think much offensively, Doug kind of finally admitted Jordan Howard's the best running back he has, at least as a runner today. It took him far too long to recognize that. Defensively, I think it took Jim a little bit too long to realize, okay, I don't have Malik. I don't have Tim Jernigan. Let's kick Brandon inside and let the younger player, whether it's Josh Sweat, who actually had more reps than Vinny Curry yesterday, feel a little bit more comfortable outside.
Desean Hall with a sack yesterday. Yeah. Put him in a game,
everybody.
Watch him get a sack.
I think I had a sack.
Oprah showed up and was giving out sacks. Everybody got a sack.
You get a sack, and you get a sack.
Hassan Ridgeway got a sack.
It was unbelievable.
Everybody got a sack. I think Jeff Mosher got a sack late in that game. I think he snuck on the field.
Got a half one.
The Jets, by the way, I don't know what that is, but they are embarrassing. I said, John, I feel like I got robbed of an NFL Sunday with that game yesterday.
Well, hey, you can watch every NFL game. And I think the 18 penalties just put on top of that. It's a tough product to watch. Mm-hmm. We've talked about that a lot. I don't understand what the NFL is trying to do with these point of emphasis holding calls and OPI specifically, where they're calling these pick plays a little bit too closely, especially when they're not involved. I mean that, and I said it way back in the summer when the referees briefed us, as they do every year on the points of emphasis. I said on this show, if they're going to call holding the way they say they're going to call holding, there's going to be a lot of people that are upset, and a lot of people are upset. But when you have that culture and you add in just a terrible team that didn't prepare right, yeah, it's going to be an ugly product. But if you're an Eagles fan, you're just happy with 31-6.
31-6, final, Eagles win. And again, we talked about this. Yes, the Jets are bad, but in a league where you can't predict, from week to week what the heck's going to happen. I know, yes, you feel like you could beat the Jets. Yes, you could beat the Redskins. Yes, you could beat the Dolphins. It feels like we always try to find ways to say it wasn't impressive, but they beat up on that team yesterday, and it was never even close. 31-6, Eagles over the Jets. John McMullen at JF McMullen. More on the Eagles as they get ready for the Vikings. This one should be interesting. We'll have that all week long. Football at 4 here on 97.3 ESPN. Real quick, John, Gruden fired. The Cowboys lose at home, and the Giants come back to life in the NFC East. What stood out the most in the East yesterday?
Well, anytime a coach gets fired, I think that's the biggest story of a particular day. But everybody knew it was coming for Jay Gruden, and I think from his perspective, after he heals his wounds, nobody likes to be fired, and there's only 32 of these jobs. I said he'll feel good about himself because next year he'll have his choice of coordinator jobs, and I think he'll even get head coaching interviews, to be honest, because people know in this league what the problem is in Washington, and it wasn't Jay Gruden.
All right, we got more on Football at 4 tomorrow right here on the Sports Bash. Thank you, pal.
Thank you, guys.